Hi guys! In today's video we're going to continue with the chapter of organizational structure, and specifically we're going to have a look at delegation, delayering, bureaucracy, centralization and decentralization. So basically some other terms that we need to understand in the topic of organizational structures. Now imagine you are a manager of a team. So this is the manager and you have a team of 3 people. And your workload is a little more than what you can handle at that specific moment. Whereas after some investigation, you find out that your team is managing quite fine and that they still have some extra space to have some extra work done. So what you can do is delegate. Yeah. So what is delegation? Delegation can be defined as the passing of authority down the organizational hierarchy to carry out specific activities. However, the person who delegated the work remains accountable for the outcome of the delegated work. He remains accountable means that he's still responsible for the result. So if we come back to the example of our team, certain tasks, as we'll see later on, we'll have a look or discuss which types of tasks, but certain tasks can be delegated to some members of the team. I specifically put the pictures or the images of the little breaks a little aside, not to the original workload that the team had, but kind of like put it aside so that it can be clear that these specific activities or the extra workload that we gave them, that we delegated, is not their original work. And the question is now, should we delegate any task? Is it possible to delegate any task? And the second question that we can reflect on is, how do we delegate? So if you want to have a little moment to think about these questions, pause the video and try to answer them maybe by yourself or in pairs or groups. So the first question, should we delegate any task? No, we cannot delegate any task and we should not. Certain tasks are specific only for the manager. For example, hiring and dismissing of employees. Imagine that you would be delegated from your boss the task, please fire Bob. Bob is your colleague. It's not appropriate for you to do such a task if you're the subordinate, if you're the employee. So certain tasks should not be delegated. Certain tasks which are very specific to the management or leadership role should not be delegated, because we also should think about how that's going to look for the rest of the team and so on. And how do we delegate? Well, there are certain rules as to how we should do it. First of all, definitely we should make sure that the team actually has space to do that extra work. We should ask the person that we delegate our task to or activities to should give consent with that. He or she should be fine and willing to do that extra work. But it's very important to understand delegation as sort of an art, because it's a very important skill and it can also be done wrong. If we do it right, we are in a way empowering our subordinate to make decisions, to not just do some tasks, but also within the task maybe make some decisions. So we're kind of shifting our decision-making authority from one organizational level to a lower one. In general, delegation is good because, first of all, we are saving money and time because our managers are not overloaded. And if we're delegating managerial tasks, or the tasks that in general the manager is supposed to do to the lower levels, we are building the skills of our employees even on those lower levels. And if these employees see that they're being empowered, that they're being trusted, that they're learning something new, we are also motivating them. So delegation is a very good way or how to motivate people. But only, of course, if those people agree with the things being delegated to them. If we're doing it poorly, then poor delegation might, on the other hand, cause frustration and confusion to all the parties. So again, this is why we need to have the other person agree with the delegated task. And sort of another extreme is called micromanagement. So micromanagement you can imagine as the manager giving, a task, but then controlling every single, move that the employee does. So the manager, in a way, is providing too much input, too much direction, and is reviewing the delegated work in such a way that is not giving the employee any freedom. So in the end, if your manager is micromanaging, it's very demotivational because you don't seem to have any added value. And this is where the frustration and demotivation comes from. In the end, the employee might be thinking to themselves, okay, if the manager is controlling every single move that I'm doing, then why am I even doing it? Why isn't he doing it himself? So delegation is an art, is a skill, but in the end, who is responsible for the tasks? Still the manager. However, the employee needs to still show the results of their activities in a transparent way. So the employee is accountable to their manager, and the manager is overall held accountable, and is responsible for the overall result because it is their original task. It's originally in their job description. So when employees are delegated tasks, they're accountable to the manager for good performance. However, the manager remains ultimately the one who is still responsible for the work done. Therefore, managers are advised to, first of all, train and advise the employees how to do the task correctly. So this is for you to do the delegation properly, for you to delegate properly. And you should monitor your employees' progress and provide regular feedback. In that way, you, as a manager, you're sure that, first of all, the employees being trained, their skill levels are increasing, and that they're doing the right job, and you're also controlling the overall result. If you're giving them too much freedom, then you cannot assure that the result is going to be the one that you want. Now, how is delegation connected to different organizational structures? If we have a flat structure compared to a tall structure with a narrow span control of 3, in which of these organizational structures would you delegate more, or would you expect delegation to occur more? Think about it for a minute. So the answer is the flat structure is going to be more likely to encourage delegation, whereas in a tall structure, we're probably going to control our subordinates more closely. Why is that, you might ask? Well, let's think about it. In general, if we have a wider span of control, that means that the manager is controlling more people, and he has more people to delegate to. And second of all, you cannot control your employees so well. And on the other hand, you also want your employees to be more skilled, because there aren't that many levels. They're still all on the same level, but you want them to improve somehow. So you delegate more tasks, and also there might be a lot more activities or tasks connected to the leadership and management role itself. As the manager has so many employees, it's going to be harder for them to lead and manage, and therefore they won't have as much time for other activities that might be specific just to the department. Some of the tasks that he would normally do, he can delegate. Now we're going to have a look at some new topic, and this is the difference between the word centralization and decentralization. And centralization is defined as keeping all of the important decision-making powers within the head office or the center of the organization. Decentralization is defined as decision-making powers are passed down the organization to empower subordinates and regional or product managers. Just look at the pictures right now. If you have a centralized organization, you have centralization in your organization, then you will have one specific manager in the middle making most of the important decisions, and then telling the rest of the team what to do. As you can see here, the person at the top, or the management team, makes the decisions, and they're just informing the employees of what needs to be done. So most of the decision-making power is happening at the center. Now, decentralization, if we have in a business, we are empowering our subordinates. We're basically delegating some of the decision-making to our subordinates. So in this case, the decisions are also happening at the lower levels, not just in the center. And you can see that people are kind of accountable to each other. They are delegating maybe to each other. But it's not organized in a way where you have one important person making all the decisions, or one important person being at the center of all decisions. A centralized management structure means that the most decisions are taken in the center or higher levels of management, and a decentralized management structure means that many decisions are not taken at the center of the business, but are delegated to a lower level of management. Now, what do you think could be the advantages of decentralization? So originally, in the past, centralization would be most common, but as we flattened our organizational structures, we tended to decentralize. So the advantages is that decisions are taken by managers who are closer to the action. What does that mean? We're delegating decisions to our managers, who are now maybe communicating with our customers more, who are closer to the action in the way that they know what is happening, they know what needs to be done. They're trusted because we know that they're skilled in their job and they're well informed. And we are trusting them when making the decisions at that particular moment. This is again giving the managers more satisfaction from their work, because as we've seen, delegation empowers people. And as a result, if the managers that are closer to the action do not have to wait for higher levels of management to make the decisions for them, but they can do it on their own, then decisions can be made much more quickly. The employees do not need to discuss everything with their superiors, they can just do it themselves. There are very clear advantages to decentralization. However, that does not mean that centralization does not have its place in organizational structures. There are still numerous advantages of centralization. For example, centralization is going to be useful when businesses need a fixed set of rules and procedures in a specific business. Centralization helps be consistent throughout the organization, because it prevents any conflict between decisions and avoids confusion in the minds of consumers. Senior managers take decisions in the interest of the whole business, not just one division of it. The central buying is happening, so it allows for greater economies of scale. And very often the senior managers will be very experienced decision makers. As we're going to have a look later on when we discuss bureaucracy, in certain organizations, it is needed. The advantages of decentralization: more local decisions can be made, as we've seen, more junior managers can develop skills, and this prepares them for more challenging roles. So these are just, in general, advantages of delegation. Delegation and empowerment are made easier. This will have positive effects on motivation. Perfect. And decision-making in responses to changes. So basically, decision-making will be faster and more flexible. Now, talking about bureaucracy. I've already mentioned that in certain companies and certain organizations, it will be more advantageous to have centralization. So bureaucracy is defined as an organizational system with standardized procedures and rules. And it's especially in a bureaucracy that we're going to need to have centralization happening. Bureaucracy is a system that is most commonly found in government organizations, and the following features are characteristic for it. Decisions are taken centrally, they're put into effect by staff who are following set procedures and protocols. There are very formal hierarchical structures. Often, bureaucracies are associated with excessive administration, paperwork, and formalities. The disadvantages of a bureaucracy is that it discourages initiative and enterprise. So very often the workers working in government organizations, if they somehow cannot work or are not happy working within these procedures and protocols, they can be discouraged. Because if they want to be initiative and they want to, show some entrepreneurial skills, then either they need to move up to the specific level of hierarchy that allows initiative and enterprise, or they might need to leave the organization. Another disadvantage is the impersonality and ineffectiveness when a decision needs to be adapted to suit an individual case. So very often there are individual cases that, for which the set procedures and protocols maybe don't make sense. They are somehow, in a way, maybe discriminating that particular person. However, the social worker or the worker working for the government cannot make an exception. They just cannot. Unfortunately, the procedures and protocols do not allow that. So this is what it means by impersonality and ineffectiveness. Now, going back to the topic of centralization and decentralization, we've seen that nowadays businesses are aiming to achieve flatter organizational structures because they understand that decentralization for most for-profit making businesses are taking advantage of flatter organizational structures and of decentralization. And for that reason, since the tall organizational structures are not needed anymore, businesses need to react to that. And how do they do that? This is called delayering. So delayering is a trend defined as the removal of one or more of the levels of hierarchy from an organizational structure. The reason why delayering is happening is because there were improvements in IT, and this maybe enabled senior managers to communicate with their junior staff more effectively, even if the departments are dispersed. And because of this better communication and more monitoring of the performance, we have kind of come to the conclusion that the role of the middle managers is not so important anymore. And we don't need to have middle managers because the top management will still be able to monitor the results very effectively. Businesses saw the benefits of flat organizational structures. This is why the layering happens. It reduces the cost of management salaries. There is better communication and delegation, and people are motivated higher. So as a result, you're going to abolish one level of hierarchy. Basically, the point or the aim of delayering is to have flat organizational structure. It may be a good time to practice some of the things that we've learned so far. So here is a short exercise that you can do on your own. Try to define the term centralized decision-making structure. Outline the difference between centralized and decentralized decision-making structures in an organization like Tata. So here, don't forget to refer to the case study. And explain 2 reasons why Tata has maintained centralized control over finance and corporate strategy. Now, let's review the differences between flat and tall organizational structures very briefly. This chart is taken from the Cognitive textbook. So you're supposed to compare the 2 structures, and for each of the terms, the levels of hierarchy, span of control, decision process, chain of command, and delegation, try to just write in a few words how they're going to differ for each of those types of structure. So if you're not finished, then please pause the video. So for the flat organizational structure, we know that we're going to have a few levels of hierarchy, whereas for the tall organizational structure, we're going to have many levels of hierarchy. The flat organizational structure is going to tend to have a wide span of control, whereas the tall organizational structure is going to have a narrow span of control. The decision process is going to be rather decentralized in a flat organizational structure, whereas in the tall organizational structure, the decision process is going to be centralized. The chain of command is going to be short in a flat one and long in a tall structure. When it comes to delegation, as we've seen today, we tend to delegate more in a flat organizational structure, whereas in a tall one, there's less delegation of authority.